All right, let's dive right into this explainer because we are breaking down a newly filed, absolutely explosive court document today. We're looking straight at Apple's trade secret lawsuit against OpenAI and several former Apple employees. And I've got to tell you, reading through this federal complaint, it honestly reads less like a dry legal document and way more like a high-stakes corporate thriller. Apple is alleging a massive coordinated hardware heist by literally one of the biggest names in artificial intelligence.
Oh, lol. I found out I can access the network storage. So funny. Yeah, that is an exact text message that Apple alleges was sent by a former senior system electrical engineer named Chang Liu. According to the filing, after leaving Apple, Liu exploited an unknown network bug to just siphon highly confidential engineering files. He treated what Apple is calling a massive security breach as a laughing matter. It really sets the tone for exactly the kind of brazen behavior Apple claims to have uncovered here.
Okay, Section 1. The motive. OpenAI's hardware pivot. So you might be wondering, why would this even happen? Well, to understand the alleged theft, we have to look at the financial pressures outlined in the lawsuit. The complaint notes that OpenAI has reportedly raised over $180 billion from investors, which is wild, but they are burning through cash at a historic pace. This has placed intense pressure on OpenAI's leadership to move beyond just software and actually deliver profitable, physical consumer devices to justify that staggering valuation. But here's the thing, building a hardware division from scratch is incredibly hard and incredibly expensive. Just look at the sheer speed of the timeline Apple lays out. In 2024, I/O Products is founded by former Apple executives as a dedicated hardware vehicle. Then, by May 2025, OpenAI acquires I/O for $6.5 billion, pulling it into their operations. And by November 2025, they already have their first hardware prototypes completed. I mean, that is fast. Apple points to this rapid timeline to allege that OpenAI took unlawful shortcuts. Basically, instead of spending decades building hardware expertise, Apple claims OpenAI just bought it and stole it. Let's move on to Section 2, the prize, Apple's secrets. What exactly does Apple claim was stolen, and why is it so immensely valuable to a rival? Well, Apple isn't just claiming someone took a few lines of code here. They categorize the stolen secrets across entire ecosystems. We're talking hardware engineering, like circuit designs and unreleased product roadmaps. Under manufacturing, it's the design of custom machinery and proprietary metal finishing techniques. And then the global supply chain, the highly guarded identities of sub-suppliers and the confidential logistics you need to build products at a global scale. This is literally the playbook for how to build a modern consumer device. We are talking about the exact blueprints that make the phone in your pocket function.
Section 3. The engineer, Chang Liu. The timeline of the specific technical espionage Apple alleges against Liu is just fascinating. According to the complaint, Liu left Apple in January 2026, but he somehow failed to return an authenticated Apple-issued laptop. By February, while he was already working over at OpenAI, he realized a rare bug allowed his old credentials to still access Apple's secure network folders. And surprise, he didn't report it. Instead, he allegedly used this access while his former colleague, Alyssa Peng, was still inside Apple, keeping it up right until she also departed for OpenAI in April. The complaint gets incredibly specific here, too. Apple claims Liu used this unauthorized access to download thousands of pages of blueprints, including really detailed data on main logic board testing. And knowing what he was doing was illicit, the suit alleges he directed Alyssa Peng to communicate with him privately over the Line Messenger Act to hide his tracks. Actually, he allegedly used this channel to actively coach her on how to evade Apple's security team, telling her exactly what confidential material to download and study before her own job interview with OpenAI.
Section 4. The executive, Tang Tan. Now, the allegations don't just stop at the engineer level. Tang Tan is no mid-level manager. The guy spent 24 years at Apple, ultimately serving as vice president of product design for iPhone and Apple Watch, and he is now OpenAI's chief hardware officer. The lawsuit claims Tan used his deep insider knowledge during OpenAI job interviews with current Apple employees. He would allegedly just drop highly classified internal Apple project code names, casually asking candidates, "What's the plan?" for unannounced products, effectively using his former authority to extract active trade secrets. Apple describes this as a highly systemic, three-step extraction strategy. It's like a machine. Step 1. Require Apple candidates to bring CAD files and design artifacts to their interviews. Step 2. Conduct literal show-and-tell sessions with physical, proprietary Apple parts. And Step 3. Once hired, distribute internal security evasion checklists to help the employees sneak out of Apple undetected. To highlight how audacious this allegedly was,
The complaint includes a quote from an actual surprised Apple candidate. When instructed by OpenAI interviewers to bring physical parts, we're talking batteries, systems in package, main logic boards, to the interview as props, the candidate remarked that they didn't even know we could take those from the office. Apple uses this to argue that OpenAI leadership totally normalized the theft of physical trade secrets. Apple also alleges that Tan specifically distributed a highly confidential internal Apple offboarding document, literally marked Need to Know, to new OpenAI hires. This document details Apple's forensic security checks for departing employees. So, by giving this to recruits before they formally resigned, OpenAI was allegedly teaching them how to avoid the dreaded walkout, where security escorts you from the building immediately, allowing them to stay on the inside longer to gather more information.
Section 5. Institutional espionage. This brings us to the broader implications, right? The complaint emphasizes that this was not just a case of a few rogue employees, but a coordinated strategy by OpenAI and IO products to infiltrate Apple's most trusted networks. Apple alleges OpenAI directly targeted a highly guarded metal finishing partner. Using insider knowledge of Apple's contracts, OpenAI allegedly misled this partner into believing they actually had Apple's permission to perform a proprietary, multi-step metal finishing technique for OpenAI's new devices. They also allegedly approached a battery supplier using insider terminology that only an Apple engineer would know. All of this is fueled by a workforce that now includes a staggering pipeline of over 400 former Apple employees.
Apple definitely does not mince words in its summary of this behavior. The complaint states that, as a natural result of these alleged actions, OpenAI's entire nascent hardware business rests on the shakiest of foundations. Because it is built on misappropriated trade secrets, Apple formally declares in the filing that OpenAI's hardware venture is rotten to its core. Which leads us to Section 6, the legal fallout. So, how is Apple responding to all this? Well, they are bringing down a dual-threat legal hammer. On one side, they're suing under the Defend Trade Secrets Act, or DTSA. This is a federal law, and Apple is arguing that the stolen information has independent economic value that OpenAI is exploiting to skip years of costly research. On the other side, they are suing the individuals for breach of contract. Every single Apple employee signs a strict intellectual property agreement, and Apple argues that by stealing files, hoarding laptops, and recruiting inside sources, Liu and Tan flagrantly violated the contracts they voluntarily signed. To stop this alleged theft dead in its tracks, Apple is asking the court for several massive remedies. They want immediate preliminary and permanent injunctions to legally force OpenAI to stop using the data. They demand the return of all stolen property and an immediate order to halt the destruction of any digital evidence or chat logs. Crucially, they're seeking exemplary damages, meaning extra punitive financial penalties, because they argue this conduct was entirely willful and malicious. Finally, they want royalties for any technology OpenAI developed using their misappropriated secrets. The whole shebang. It is a massive, aggressive legal maneuver that completely pulls back the curtain on the brutal race to build AI hardware. Which leaves us with this final, really provocative question. If the foundation of OpenAI's massive new hardware venture is truly rotten to its core, as Apple's complaint alleges, what does this mean for the future of AI devices? Will a judge shut down OpenAI's consumer tech ambitions before they even hit the market? Or is this just the new, cutthroat reality of Silicon Valley espionage? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. I hope this helped you grasp the immense scale and stakes of this legal battle.